All right. Hello and good morning, everyone. I am Kyle Nabors along with Sean Hammond, our Bears beat reporter for Bears Insider and ShawLocal.com. Hub Arkush will be along with us here in just a minute, having a bit of a technical issue. If you guys have been with us lately, Hub's headphone jack on his MacBook broke, and we've been using his what are they? I'm
AirPods.
AirPods. I'm such a not a Mac or Apple guy. But anyway, so he's restarting his computer to try and get him connect. So if you guys have any troubleshooting tips for us, that'd be great. But in the meantime, while we wait for him, Sean, here we are, just a little more than 24 hours away from the start of the NFL draft. Feels a little bit weird though, with the Bears not having a first round pick. We were talking before the show started, and I'm interested to see the comments. I feel like there's a lot less hype around the Bears going into this draft than usual, or at least excitement regarding the team. I'm not sure if it's just the lack of a first round pick or the fact that let's be frank, the Bears are in a rebuild mode, and no matter what they do in this draft, it's not going to have a huge impact on their win total this coming season.
Well, it makes sense that the excitement would be down a little bit. I don't even know if that's the right phrasing on that, because there certainly is excitement for the draft from Bears fans, and I get your guys' text messages or your Twitter messages. There's people are curious about some of these guys who are going to be available to the Bears when they come around, but certainly when you're reading these mock drafts online, and definitely the mock drafts that only do one round, you look at the top 32 picks and you say, oh, that's nice. Well, I guess we won't be getting any of those guys. And that can be kind of a bummer this time of year when you don't have a first round pick. And there's so many teams who are in that situation, which I think makes this draft super interesting. 8 teams with 2 first round picks, 8 teams without a first round pick. What's that going to mean for the movement around the draft board? Are we going to see more trades, whether that's first round or beyond that? And then also, are there going to be some surprises? Because this is a draft that doesn't have a ton of, it's not top heavy at the quarterback position. I think we're going to see maybe certainly a different draft from last year, but maybe different from what we've seen in the last couple of years. And it's going to make it really fun to watch on Thursday, although maybe not super fun for Bears fans who want to get to their pick.
I kind of find it interesting though, because without the Bears having a first round pick and the wide openness of this draft, we have no idea what's going to happen in terms of how many we're used to seeing 5, 6 QBs in the first round. You might see 2. You might not see any in the top 10. I do think that teams are going to get aggressive and probably trade up and reach more than they should. But I think we're going to have a much different feel for where the Bears stand at the end of Thursday than, obviously where we are right now. And I know that's not really surprising anyone, but it's really wide open going into this draft. And we're actually going to do another live stream at 10:30, not 9:30, at 10:30 on Friday morning, essentially as a reset, because you're going to need it after Thursday night, Sean.
Yeah, if nothing else, watch Thursday night's first round of the draft, because you want to know who's going to be available to the Bears just 7 picks later when they go at 39. And we have Hub in the chat. Hub has entered the chat. How you doing, Hub?
Well, Hub's earpods have entered the chat. I apologize, everybody, for missing the first couple minutes there, but I'm doing good. Good to be with you all. I think all the equipment should work now. And as you guys were just saying, it's draft weekend. And, it's funny because every year at the draft, you end up apologizing for what you don't know or what you're not sure of. That's the nature of this thing. That's why they call it a lottery. I had to look it up in Webster's the other just to make sure that I knew what I was talking about. Basically, according to Webster's, anything that happens by chance, you can't predict chance. You can't predict luck. You can't predict what other folks that don't want to tell you what they're doing are doing. We know who some of the best players are. We know who would look good in navy and orange. We have some idea at this point who should be there at 38, at 49, at 71. But beyond that, guys, Kyle, we've been doing this a lot of years. That's what makes it so much fun, really, for a lot of people. And what's great about it also is that there's no right or wrong when you make the pick. There's no right or wrong for months or even a year or two after you make the pick. And so it's become really a very special sporting event in and of itself.
It's always a fun time. I do miss the old days of it being just on Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the marathon and not having that kind of first round tease and then have to wait for the second and third round. But Hub, I mean, is this where, I mean, I know it's hard to rank it against other years, but is this one of the more wide open years, at least going into the first round, that you've covered?
Well, there's a few other factors, yeah, and guys, I think a lot of you with us today are aware of this, but this is one area. I try and be as modest and laid back on a lot of this stuff as we can. But at the end of the day, at Pro Football Weekly, we basically invented independent draft coverage. We were doing this 10 years before ESPN came along, and for another 25 years, it was just us and ESPN. And then all the draftniks started showing up in the 90s, and of course throughout the aughts. And there's a ton of great expert opinion out there. But I think this year you'll get a consensus amongst the experts, amongst the wannabes, amongst everybody, that it is one of the most wide open drafts we've seen. And there's a couple reasons for it. And it starts, guys, with COVID and the fact that in 2020, in August of 2020, the NCAA decided to grant an extra year of eligibility to all players because they knew that season was going to be disrupted. Some seasons were canceled. Some teams played shortened seasons, 2, 6, 7 games, whatever it may be. So all of a sudden in this class, you've got basically the potential for 6 years worth of college recruits as opposed to 5 years. You usually get 5 years to play your 4 years of eligibility. You can still only play 4 years of college football, but for guys who come in on 20 or 21 had not taken that redshirt year yet or had taken it and needed another one, they got to stay. And so there are simply more players with NFL, traits and talents, and it makes it that much more confusing. Then you also add the fact that you've got the guys who continue to come out early, and a lot of them had their 20 seasons canceled or maybe opted out or whatever it might have been. And so it makes them that much harder to evaluate. And then there's probably half a dozen pieces, guys, but the third piece to me is the quarterbacks are really screwing this up, because I know you were talking about that when I finally got my equipment to work. And at the end of the day, the only one who really should be drafted in the first round is Malik Willis, and he shouldn't really go until somewhere around 20 to 32. I suspect Kenny Pickett will go in that space somewhere too. If anybody takes either one of them in the top 10, top 15, it is strictly, you talk about a lottery ticket. You have no idea what's going to happen. But at the end of the day, you've got 7 teams with real quarterback needs. You've got 5 that are quarterback desperate. And so if, in fact, 3 or 4 of these quarterbacks, even a 5th, go in the first round, it messes everything up. And so it's fun, but that's what's making this a lot more difficult for everybody, Sean, than I think it usually is.
Yeah, as soon as that first team takes a quarterback, then all those quarterback needy teams are going to be sitting there twiddling their thumbs saying, okay, when do we make a move? And that's certainly one scenario that we could see play out. I think definitely Carolina is a team to watch there in that number 6 spot. I don't know if they would take one that high, but they're certainly one of those teams that has sort of the keys to that whole thing. It's a really interesting draft from the quarterback perspective. From the Bears perspective, you're glad you got your quarterback last year so you can focus on some other things. We were talking with Ryan Poles yesterday, Hub, and kind of like you were just saying, he was mentioning how COVID has really messed with the number of players that are in this draft. And he said there's some really deep positions. He really, he mentioned the running back position has some really good day 3 options, and the offensive lineman, I think he mentioned among a couple of positions.
Yeah, Kyle, I think the thing that really plays to the Bears' favor is offensive linemen tend to keep growing and developing. This class is deep. It may not be quite as talented on the high end, that first and second round, as we've seen in recent years, at least not at tackle. It's actually a little more talented on the interior of the offensive line, maybe than some drafts. But what you do have is that extra class. You've got 6 years worth of prospects instead of 5 or 4. And so it is very deep. And there are going to be, it's possible that the best tackles, the best offensive linemen, the best guards or centers show up with third round picks or fourth round picks. Certainly in the second round, there's going to be plenty of talent there. So, with that being, we can debate all day, and I'm anxious to get to some of our comments too, because I know they're going to want to have the debate as well. What is the greatest need? Is it wide receiver or offensive line? On one hand, Sean, I think it's wide receiver because you only got one starter on the roster and you need three. You brought in Byron Pringle, who to me was at best a 3 or a 4, to begin with, and he's already had some trouble with the police. Now, Ryan Poles told us, he didn't think it was a terrible crime and that Pringle reached out to him immediately and that he knows him well. But that was Ryan's way of saying, yeah, I knew him in Kansas City, and we knew him when he drafted him. He had some trouble that interrupted his college career. So it's not a promising start for Byron Pringle, is the point. And the Bears really need wide receivers. But what's going to help Justin Fields more? They're going to try and run the football more to help Justin Fields. That all points to the offensive line. And I got to tell you, being out at that voluntary minicamp and looking at what they had lined up there, with Sam Mustipher and Dakota Dozier trading, first team reps at right guard. And no, I was really pleased to see that they had Larry Borum at left tackle and Tevin Jenkins at right tackle, because you guys know, since we previewed last year's draft, I've been saying I love Tevin Jenkins at right tackle. I don't see him as a left tackle. Don't know if Larry Borum can play that or not, but he showed some potential. Regardless of what you think of them, you don't know what you have in them. So the Bears have 3 starting positions that they don't have sure starters at. So I don't know, guys, if the greater need is wide receiver. They're both huge, but I don't know which one's greater, wide receiver or offensive line.
I find just looking through our comments here already, the first ones that have come in, and yeah, jump into the comments here. Send us your draft question. We're going to start diving into some prospect stuff here in a minute. We already got some good ones in there. But I see stuff about defensive tackle, linebacker, wide receiver, offensive line. And that's where the Bears are. Like, Ryan Poles, we have a question about asking what we thought of Ryan Poles' press conference yesterday. I'll throw that up quick. But Ryan Poles wouldn't use the word rebuild and said that he doesn't like the word rebuild. But that's where the Bears are at. And I think that's what's interesting for fans as we go into this draft. And that's why we're seeing questions about so many different positions. Is it's really building this roster from the ground up again. And, while there are clear top needs, I think we all agree at offensive line and wide receiver, where the Bears are at, they're going to be able to make an argument for so many different positions if a solid prospect falls to them.
Yeah, Shaw, we were sitting there yesterday. I think it was Pat Finley of the Sun-Times brought up the rebuilding question again. Everybody keeps coming at it from different angles. I think I'm going to get this quote exact because I wrote about it. Go to shawlocal.com. It's in part what my column from last night was about. I know it's up there now. When asked the question again, and let's go back to January 29th or 31st, whatever it was when he was first introduced. I think I had the second question, and that was my question: is it a rebuild? And they've been hiding from it ever since. And so yesterday, Ryan says in answer, quote, "Yeah, no, rebuild is such a sensitive issue." And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, why is it so sensitive? It's really not. I'll tell you why it's so sensitive. Because it's tough to sell tickets and to sell merchandise and to get people to come and consume concessions for a rebuilding football team that's more likely to lose than it is to win. I think Ryan Poles should be embracing the rebuild. It's clearly what he's doing, and it buys him more time to succeed. If, in fact, the Bears go out and are a 5-12 football team this year, I'm not predicting anything yet, but it's kind of going in that direction at the moment. People ain't going to be happy by week 3, week 4 if Ryan Poles has told them we're not rebuilding, we're trying to compete. I'd say extend your honeymoon and say, yep, we inherited a mess. We're tearing it down. We're rebuilding around a young quarterback. That should be, Sean, from where I sit, what we should be hearing from Flus and Ryan Poles. But they're trying to go the other way, and I'm sure that's with pressure from the front office because of the business side of this equation.
Well, and that's the thing too, is Ryan Poles went a step further, and he brought up some analogy about watching HGTV with his wife late at night, and you find a house, you got a fixer upper, and some rooms need to be fixed up and some don't, blah blah blah. It's a remodel, not a rebuild or something like that. And he's basically saying it's a rebuild. I mean, he's going there without actually saying the words, which is, I think, why there's a good chance that they could be looking, and Poles basically said this yesterday, that they could be looking to trade down and acquire more picks. And they really just need, they're going to need a quantity. I don't know if 6 is enough to fill all your needs.
Yeah, Kyle, it's funny. First of all, my faith in human nature was renewed with Ryan Poles yesterday to find out I'm not the only one forced to watch Love It or List It every night for, half an hour, and the Fixer Uppers and all the different shows they have. But in all seriousness, this is why I kind of had to use it in the column. The way he described it, he buried himself deeper because the analogy he gave is that when you watch these Fixer Uppers and you go in and you see in some rooms it just needs a fresh coat of paint, or I forget the other thing he said it might need, and he said, and so those rooms are good. So we talk about the Bears position by the room. What happens in the quarterback room, the running back room, the safety, the defensive backs room, whatever it may be. And I went over it, room by room. The only room the Bears have in the house right now that only could use maybe a coat of paint, or a little work is the running back room. You can argue the quarterback room, since you're focused on Justin Fields, although we still don't know if he can play or not. There isn't another room in Hallis Hall that has a foundation in it. Inside linebacker does with Roquan Smith, but he's a free agent after this year and being mysterious about re-signing. And so that analogy that he used made it look more like a rebuild than maybe it even is. And so it's a strange place that I understand it. They're trying to, I said pressure from the front office. I don't think he's getting any pressure from anybody. I didn't mean to suggest that, but I think everybody's aware that when you're rebuilding and planning on losing, it doesn't create a real positive vibe in the marketplace. And then the other aspect of it, Kyle, is he's thinking about his locker room, because you don't want to tell these players we're going to stink. You don't want to say, hey, we know we don't have enough talent. Then you're not showing faith in the guys you have, and it makes it a little harder to develop them. So I do understand there's reasons to go both ways here, but this one's so obvious that I just keep wondering why they refuse to acknowledge that that's what they're doing, which is the second they made the Khalil Mack trade and got what they got back, that just screamed rebuild all over it.
Alan Dunlap here. The offense may be more gut rehab than fixer upper. Yeah, absolutely. When you look at the offensive line, wide receiver, I think we all still are optimistic about the potential of Justin Fields, but not a great rookie year, obviously. So there's a long way to go on the offense, and I guess let's go ahead and dive into some questions here regarding the draft. I think that's what people are most interested in. I'm going to go back up to the top here and just kind of work my way down so I don't miss any of these. And Mark Kazik, sorry, Mark, but good morning, everyone. Hub, have you had a chance to research Justin Ross from Clemson? He has been injured, but played 10 games last year. I hope that the Bears consider him with a 6th to 8th round pick. Well, there's not an 8th round, but maybe a priority free agent, but.
Yeah, Mark. Ross is kind of where you've got him, 6, 7. He's enough of a talent that somebody could grab him in the 5th round. Again, that position is so deep that there's going to be priority free agents that the teams will be excited about, as we are every year. But the problem with evaluating him, as you point out, is he's missed enough time that you just need to see more is what it comes down to. So this is a guy who, sometimes I'll say, hey, he's going to get a chance to play in the NFL. I think Justin Ross is probably going to play in the NFL. I don't know how high his ceiling is, because we just need to see more of him. I don't know if you've watched more of that particular young man than I have, Sean.
No, I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head there with him. He's certainly a guy who's going to be available, in those later rounds if you want to take a chance on him. And, I think the medicals are probably a big thing with him, because he has suffered through some injury history.
Really quickly here, Mr. Ciordi, I'm not how you say it. This is why we cannot develop QBs. Our fans bash, I'm not sure what that is, and media are all rabid. He's already commented that we need to relax because it's only April. I will say this: if Justin Fields is being affected by what the media says about him, then that's not a good sign. I don't think Justin Fields or anything the media says has any worry about or any effect on his development. And again, people are relaxed just because we say they're rebuilding. That's not a bad thing. I thought it was I guess I disagree with Ryan Poles' approach, but I understand his approach. But it is what it is, people,
And we're poking fun at the HGTV thing, but it's good to get some candidness from a GM though, at least just to get a little bit of personality after what we dealt with from the last regime.
Yeah, and I don't understand why he thinks that the fan base and the media are being rabid. I don't have a problem with a rebuild. I just wanted to know which way they were going, because I want to be able to judge about it. Listen,
I think
if go ahead.
So I think a vast majority of fans are on board with Ryan Poles' plan.
Well, and his actions are speaking louder than his words too. I mean, just everything that they've done indicates that's what this is.
Yeah, I mean, if you just call it what it is, then you evaluate them and you set your expectations around the rebuild and how it's going, and you start to focus more on individual players and where talent is being developed, and that's how you determine if they're being successful or not. But when you refuse to acknowledge it, you claim, no, we're going to try and contend for a division title with this roster. Well, then you set yourself up to fail, because at least with where they're at right now, it doesn't look like there's much of a chance they're going to contend for anything. And so it's really just, wanting to get everybody on the same page. But I'm not hearing the guy hasn't made a draft pick yet. He's not even, he's 60, 70% way through his first free agency. They haven't really had a mandatory camp where everybody's been together. I don't think anybody's upset with anybody right now as far as polls or flus. We're trying to get to know them, and so this is part of that process.
I think the only way that Bears fans would end up upset this weekend would be if you had a situation where there were several prospects that are well, like maybe at wide receiver, offensive line, something like that falls to the Bears, which is certainly possible at in the second round. And then they go off the board that kind of like that, like the out of left field Shea McClellan pick or something like that. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, and even with that, I mean, listen, Kyle, Shea McClellan wasn't really out of left field. I mean, we had him on our board somewhere around 28 or 20. We being Pro Football Weekly at the time, somewhere around 28 or 29. The Bears took him either at 19 or 20. What was frustrating about the Shea McClellan pick is that we had him as an outside speed rusher in a 3-4 scheme. The Bears were playing 4-3 at the time, and they said he was going to put a hand on the ground and play defensive end. And obviously that never worked out so well. He actually was a better player when he got to New England because they used him in a 3-4 scheme, or at least moved him around a lot more. So I don't – listen, that's the great thing about the draft. There's going to be picks where people are going to start jumping up and down and celebrating because they didn't think their team could get that guy. But it may turn out that guy shouldn't have been picked that high. And then you turn it around. There's going to be other picks. One of my most infamous, I can't call it famous moments in Chicago media, was the night that Kyle Long, was made the first pick. And I wasn't on the radio. We were streaming on the web for 670 The Score because there was I guess it was a Cubs game. I don't remember. There was some live sports on. And I just got annoyed the year after the Shea McClellan pick and instantly said, it wasn't Jerry Angelo, it was Phil Emery just blew that pick. Now, first of all, I would have never said that if I had realized that it was going to end up all over the radio. We weren't on the radio, but of course the station I worked for decided to make it a promo, and it lives with me to this day. But more to the point, when I said they blew the pick, it wasn't because I didn't think Kyle Long was going to be a good football player. I mean, I didn't know, but I wasn't saying he can't play, you got to bust. It was because I did know from talking to almost every team in the league, he wasn't going higher than 30 to 35, maybe even 40 anywhere else. And the Bears took him at 19 or 20. And so that's this whole, evaluating the draft thing. It's enjoying it. It's getting excited. It's being disappointed. All of the fan base's excitement and disappointment is going to be from the information they've accumulated from a lot of sources and draft nicks, many of whom, quite frankly, aren't always that good. And so it's the process, and that's what makes it fun. But we have to be clear about that. So what no fan should do Thursday, Friday, or Saturday is give up their season tickets, trash all their Bears memorabilia or get too upset about anything, no matter who they take. Because, we just don't know until we get to see these kids play. I mean, I could spend the rest of this podcast and the next 3 rattling off guys that Bears fans were disappointed with when they were drafted who turned out to be, pretty decent football players. So it's just enjoying the process and then, letting it come to you. I did want to add one other thing, though, to Sean's point, Kyle. He mentioned, Ryan Poles talked about trying to trade down, acquire more picks. He also talked about it 3 times and brought it up himself 1.5 of those times. So, again, you do that because you're rebuilding. You don't do that because you got a great team and you're looking for a few pieces to plug in and contend. But I don't think it could be any clearer. I don't know why he would keep going back to it if he wasn't trying. I don't think he's doing, trying to confuse us here and suddenly going to trade up into the top 10 and mortgage the draft for the next 2 or 3 years. That's what they're doing now.
All right. Well, let's see. We had a question about Justin Rhodes. Let's stick with wide receivers and our guy that was being Mr. Ciordi, or however you say it here. Sorry. That one is escaping me. But David Bell, the best route runner coming out of the draft. If he falls to round 3, as all the mocks I have done, then why not just sit back and wait for him and draft defensive tackle, offensive line with the first 2 picks, Hub?
Well, for starters, Mr. Ciordi, is that I don't know where your expertise comes from, but David Bell is not necessarily the best route runner in the draft. I mean, he's a good route runner, and there's a lot of very good route runners in the draft. He's also a bit undersized and not as fast as you would like. So, you can't evaluate your picks by the positions that have the greater depth, or what you're looking at is that as you come up on the board, about 5 picks, somewhere around 33 or 34, the first thing that's likely to happen, and it's the only thing, I agree with you, Kyle, I enjoyed the draft much more when it was the Saturday, Sunday marathon. But the one nice thing we do get here is the 2 overnight trade windows. Because what will happen is at the end of the first round, everybody will take a step back and say, okay, wow, here's 7 guys who never should have gotten out of the first round. And there's going to be a trade or 2 in front of the Bears before they get to 39. So when you get to 33 or 34, you got to start to look at your board now and say, who do we value the most? You can't rule out the possibility of coming up a few spots if there's a guy that you think should have gone 15th and he's still sitting there at 36. But it's what they're trying to avoid and what you're really looking for. And again, Ryan Poles explained this a little bit to us on Tuesday, Sean. He said, look at your board, look at how many players you have sitting there that you would think were good value at 39. And if you trade down, could they still be there at 44 or 46? And I think that's the process that the Bears are going to be working to evaluate their picks, not what kind of depth there is, or because one player like David Bell, who, by the way, I don't think there's any chance will go in the first round. And I guess maybe that's what Mr. Ciordi was saying, is that he is likely to be there at 35 or 40. I don't think he's good enough to take at 39, to be honest with you. But again, now this is just my evaluation, and I'm not suggesting that I know more than any of these other evaluators.
Well, yeah, we saw that exact scenario play out last year with the Bears when they moved up to 39 to get Tevin Jenkins. And that's why those picks in the late 30s become so valuable, because you got all these GMs sitting there, almost 24 hours waiting for the second round to start. And, they're evaluating those guys who are still on the board. And so it wouldn't surprise me to see the Bears potentially make a move there with that 39th pick, because there's going to be teams who see who's available and they're going to want to make a move and move up. And that could be for any number of positions. But certainly, the Bears, they don't necessarily need to keep 39 and 48. If you feel like you can still get a good player further on down the board and pick up an extra pick, then that might be what they're willing to do here.
Yeah. Really quickly here, I'm looking through a list of wide receivers. And David Bell, you're looking at a guy probably in the 3rd round. My question for you guys is, how many wide receivers do you expect to be off the board, generally, obviously, by the time the Bears pick at number 39?
Kyle, it could be 4, it could be 8. My best guess looking at these guys is I see 4 who absolutely shouldn't get out of the first round. And I see 2 more who very well could be first rounders, who I think teams could be moving around for, 33 to 38. So I would say probably 6 will be off the board at 39, and I'm looking at my boards here, and I've got guys at 7, 8, and 9 who might be worthy of a second round pick, but I might not be as excited about them as some of the offensive linemen that'll still be there. So, Sean, my best guess is, whether the Bears stay at 39 or not, that there could be 6 gone in the first 38 picks.
Yeah, that was the number I was looking at too. And I imagine it's going to be through Jahan Dotson, who's the guy coming out of Penn State, would probably be that sixth guy off the board. And, then you're looking at Sky Moore, you're looking at George Pickens potentially still being there at 39. But again, if there's plenty of wide receiver needy teams. So if somebody wants to move up, that's entirely possible that we could see a couple of guys go in the late 30s before the Bears pick.
Real quick, Kyle, Jahan Dotson's he's curious. Sean, I agree with Sean. I've got him at 6, but he's curious to me because he's just not very big. That's not his fault, obviously. But when you're using these first round picks and even these high seconds, you want a guy who checks off all the traits. Now, hey, there's a lot of successful receivers in the NFL, Jahan Dotson size, but. That's why I waffled around 5, 6, or 7. I definitely there's 5 that I think will absolutely be gone by 39. I'm not Dotson's the one I'm not sure about.
Mm-hmm. It's funny that you say that about size, and Sean mentioned the 2 names I was going to bring up. So let's say we get to 39 and guys like Sky Moore and George Pickens are on the board, 2 very different receivers in terms of style and size. Sean, I'll start with you. If that type of, 2 different, very different type of wide receivers are there for the Bears, what do you think they should prioritize, size or speed?
I would think that they would lean more towards size, given that they already got a guy like Darnell Mooney, who's not the biggest guy, and he provides some of that speed. Now, you can never have too much speed. We kind of saw them try to do that last year. I guess you can have too much speed and not use it, but you can never have too much speed. I would think that they lean more towards a bigger bodied guy, a guy who can sort of, not to necessarily fill Allen Robinson's shoes right away, but a guy of a similar mold.
Yeah, I think that the fact that Darnell Mooney is an undersized speed guy, and then that he's really the only one you got. You got to put some size around him somewhere. I suspect the Bears want speed everywhere. We know that that's kind of the new watch. Well, it's always been, but Matt Eberflus in particular keeps talking about speed. So you look at it, after what I call the big 5. You look at the next 5 receivers. Jahan Dotson's there, Christian Watson, the kid from North Dakota State. You got George Pickens from Georgia. Everybody's talking about. You mentioned Sky Moore, and the issue with him beyond his size is you got Western Michigan. So kind of like Christian Watson. Not that those are bad programs, but it's not the same level of competition. And the one other kid that's really interesting.
Hey, hold on. Leave the Maction alone, okay? The Maction's just fine, okay? It provides us a lot of entertainment on Tuesday nights during the fall.
Guys, it's good football. I'm just saying that as far as how these kids, project to the NFL is it's just about knowing as much. It's about where you pick them. It's not what kind of players you're going to be. But then the one other kid I was going to throw in there is Jalen Tolbert out of South Alabama, who is probably the best compromise of both size and speed. But out of South Alabama, who was he playing against? Now, he's an interesting kid because when they got in with some of the power schools, which South Alabama does every once in a while for a payday, he played some of his best football. And then there's also the local kid, Alec Pierce. I don't know a lot of teams that are not a lot of teams. I don't know a lot of folks, including some teams I've talked to, who have him in their top 35 to 40 on their draft boards, but they've all got him somewhere 40 to 60. And he's 6'3". He's 212, 213 pounds. He's from the Chicago area. He was in that wild Cincinnati program, and he's a hell of an athlete. He's not a pure burner, but he's an outstanding athlete. And that's a pick that I think would make everybody happy that could still be there at 48. Now I've seen a couple mocks that haven't gone to the Packers at the end of the first round. So this is with all these wide receivers with NFL talent, but not knowing which one is going to be the next Deebo Samuel. It's a good year to be drafting wide receivers, but it's a tougher than usual year to be drafting wide receivers too. You also got to throw in the injury factors, guys. I've got Jameson Williams in my big 5. He can't get out of the first round, but he had an ACL 4 months ago. You know, you don't know what that medical looks like. So all these things are kind of up for grabs at the moment.
I agree. Big fan of Alec Pierce. Eric Stokes asked us, with no depth currently on the roster at linebacker, why isn't this position garnering more attention, Hub?
Well, I think it's because, Eric, this is one of those deals where they've got a little more depth than you realize. There is some excitement around Nicholas Morrow, and I understand that. You know, I think that he can be a poor man's Roquan Smith. They're very similar body types. He's that kind of athlete. And when he has been healthy on the football field, the guy hits like a freight train. You can find tape of it. But the thing that bothers me a little bit is that he wasn't always healthy, but even when he was only a starter for the Raiders about 40% of the time. And so I'm not sure what that was about. It could have to do with coming from, you know, Greenville and just, you know, we talk about level of competition. I mean, that's barely Division III ball, you know, so he may still just be learning. But the point is, they think they're really, at least for this year, if they can get Roquan re-signed long-term, it'd be better. Morrow's on a 1-year deal, but they love those two. And one of the things that Flus told me at the owners' meetings in Florida that interested me a little bit, because I think it's his version of the 4-3 and the Tampa 2. It's not something I've seen consistently, but he said in his defense, the Sam linebacker is only on the field for about 12 to 15% of the snaps. And so, you know, they're comfortable with Smith and Morrow, and Matt Adams, who they brought from Indianapolis, who was some of Matt Eberflus's and Alan Williams' depth in Indianapolis. They think is going to give them some depth there as well. And then remember, there's the kid Caleb Johnson, you know, who was a priority free agent last year, who made a few plays, you know, before he hurt his knee, and he could very well be in line for that Sam linebacker spot. So I'd still like to see a you know, higher end starting Sam linebacker, a guy who forces him to leave him on the field more. But that position, Sean, I don't think is as great a need now. I mean, you don't have a starting safety next to Eddie Jackson. You don't have a starting right guard. You may not have a starting tackle. You don't have 2 starting wide receivers. And even at cornerback, you know, a lot of people think cornerback is a need. You want to get better, but they've actually got decent competition for the corner spot, the nickel and the boundary across from Jaylon Johnson. I'm not saying they're good enough, but they've got competition there. And that's why when we talk about this, I don't put linebacker and cornerback in the same categories as wide receiver and offensive line and safety.
Yeah, I mean, just for those same reasons. I mean, you list off the positions that they need, and linebacker is, you know, certainly, yes, you want to get another one and you know, add to that position, but you got some bigger needs up higher up on your board, and wide receiver and O-line are certainly among them. You know, I don't know what they're going to do at right guard. That's going to have to, you know, we'll have to see what happens in the draft here. Hub, do you think I guess we don't really know, but, you know, are they going to target an inside guy, or do you think that there's still that possibility they could get a tackle and bump one of those tackles inside?
Well, you know, first, I'm kind of, for those of you who are with us live, I'm kind of laughing here as we're talking because I don't want to beat a dead horse. But again, guys, when you talk about needs, when you have them everywhere, you're rebuilding. And they're rebuilding. They have needs everywhere, you know. So, you know, I don't think they can go wrong. But we know how important the offensive line is and a wide receiver to the development of Justin Fields, which is probably the most important thing on their to-do list, and that's why we're focused there. And the answer to your question, Sean, first of all, a lot of these guys are interchangeable. I mean, I look at a kid like Tyler Smith from Tulsa that a lot of these mocks have the Bears taking at 39 or 48. It's because everybody loves the mean streak in him. Or you've got Raymond, the Division III or FCS guy, whatever you call him.
Central Michigan.
Yeah, Bernard Raymond. Well, Central Michigan, I guess, is the Division I. But
another slight towards the MAC, Kyle.
Well, no. Again, there's been some good football players that come out of there. I know the slight there is that this kid was a tight end 3 years ago, you know, and he's huge, and he's a really exciting prospect because he is 6'8". I think a lot of people, you know, are projecting him a lot more as a tackle, either left or right, but he could play guard. Tyler Smith is being projected as a guard who maybe could play tackle. Both the Ohio State kids are tackles who some people are projecting as guards. So I don't think you're going to see they're not going to be drafting Tyler Linderbaum, who may be the best center prospect we've seen since James Daniels, but is only going to be a center. They're not going to draft, Kenyon Green is somebody who I think everybody's calling the top guard in this draft. I don't see him playing tackle in the NFL. Finding another Larry Borum is probably the way they're going to go. And so, the names you want to keep, if they go there at 38, I'd keep an eye on Raymond and Tyler Smith, who may be the best players available, unless Trevor Penning falls. And I don't think he will, but just don't know.
I think Tyler Smith would be an interesting guy. Big frame. I think, what is he, 6'5"? I think he's 6'5". I mean, he's a big guy.
Yeah, but he's big, but every scouting report you see on him, and then watch some of the tape, it's really impressive. He's just nasty.
Yeah.
He doesn't try to block people; he tries to hurt people. And I'm sure he's a good guy off the field. I'm not making him a criminal here, but that's clearly what Ryan Poles is looking for. That's why he signed Lucas. I didn't know this about Lucas Patrick because he had been somewhat nondescript playing for the Packers. But now that we've talked to him once or twice, and you even see him on the practice field, that's why he's here. He's kind of Olin Kreutz personality-wise, and that's what they're looking for. They're looking for 5 Olin Kreutzes.
And that's what I was kind of getting at with Ryan Poles. I mean, Tyler Smith is a big guy who just beat the living hell out of you, and it kind of fits the mold of what Ryan Poles described when he was looking for offensive linemen.
But what's interesting there, Kyle, he is also unpolished. He needs a lot of work. His technique is, even I know enough about technique watching the tape on him that his footwork needs work. When you talk offensive and defensive linemen, the first thing the old timers, all the scouts who've been around for a while, talk about is hands and how they use their hands. And Tyler Smith, at this point, doesn't have a clue what to do with his hands. But if with the right coach, and maybe that's Chris Morgan, I hope it is. That's why he's here. He's got really high ceiling.
Alan Dunlap says, with all the talk about wide receiver offensive line, the Bears have one starting caliber tight end. Wouldn't another help the running and passing game, make this more Shanahan-style offense? Hub? Well,
Ryan Griffin and James O'Shaughnessy are those types of backup tight ends. It's exactly why they're here. So, again, the Bears could use more talent everywhere. They're hoping, or I'm hoping that Jesper Horsted can finally step in as the U tight end, the move tight end, because he's a hell of a receiver. But his first 3 years, even though all he did was catch touchdown passes, they wouldn't put him on the field. Now they did, they didn't re-sign a lot of their exclusive rights or restricted free agents, but they let Ryan Nall get away. They let Alex Bars get away. I was disappointed to see Bars get away based on the talent that is here. But Horsted was a guy that they made a point of keeping. So would love to see them get another pass catching tight end. But as far as the establishing the run game and helping out Kmet, that's Griffin and O'Shaughnessy are NFL vets, and that's what they do well. Look at their career stats. They're not big pass catchers, but you can pretty much count on them if Kmet gets banged up, or if you want to go 2 tight end, that they're going to be able to go out there and block for you, Sean.
Yeah, and for those reasons, I would be surprised if the Bears drafted one, with a 2nd or a 3rd round pick. Sure, maybe they could be looking at a guy in the 6th round or further on down the line, but you have some depth there, and yeah, the hope is that Jesper Horsted can bring his game to that next level and really get involved, because we've seen some good things from him when he's gotten the opportunity.
And really quick, Kyle, if I could, it's a bad year for tight ends. This is the other part of this. I'd really be surprised if there's one in the 1st round. Trey McBride, Cade Otton could maybe sneak into the 1st round. Some analysts have Greg Dulcich from UCLA as their top tight end. I could see Dulcich there. If the Bears drafted Dulcich in the 3rd round, I'd have no problem with that, because he looks like he might be a pretty good U tight end in the NFL. But I don't think he may not get that far down to 71. Probably won't. And short of getting Dulcich where you didn't expect to see him, they may take one with that 6th round pick. Or my hope is when Ryan Poles talks about trading down, so much, I don't want to see a lot of extra 7s and 6s. Those give you some flexibility to tag on to other trades. But that's where you're really throwing darts at the board, because you're probably going to get as good a prospects with your priority free agents as you are with your 7s and maybe some of your 6s.
Yeah, I thought even 10 days ago that the Bears would probably target a tight end at some point of the draft, and then the Ryan Griffin and O'Shaughnessy signings happen. So I don't think they're going to target anyone outside of maybe the 6th round. I expect that's something they'll add in priority free agency. I actually kind of like Ryan Griffin. I know he's a veteran. I think he's 31 years old. He can do some stuff though. I particularly liked some of his earlier work in Houston. I know he spent the last couple of years with the New York Jets. And the production hasn't been as high, but it's really hard to produce in that New York Jets offense the last couple of years. So,
yeah, and I like O'Shaughnessy too. It was Glenbard, wasn't it, Sean?
Yeah,
I know he's a local kid. I want to say he went to Glenbard
last week.
It could be.
He is a local kid. I'll double check that.
But he's not that different from Griffin. I mean, he's another guy who he's never been more than a 3, maybe a 2.5 in his travels in the NFL. But he'll make some plays once in a while, and he's a big body, and he for depth. I think they fixed that up a little bit. And listen, they've carried 5 at times. I think they probably carry 4, and I think it will be Kmet, Griffin, and O'Shaughnessy, and I would hope Horsted is the guy unless they get somebody who's a better receiving threat.
Naperville North and Illinois State.
Oh, so it was not Glenbard. I'm sorry about that. Forgive me, Matt Bowen.
Timothy Wire asked, rumored reports suggest multiple teams may look to move back in the draft. Could that hamper polls moving back and acquiring more picks? Hub?
Sam, there's rumored reports about everything right now, and there's always teams looking to move back, always teams looking to move up, and there's always teams looking to move up who end up moving back, and vice versa too. Teams looking to move back end up moving up. We just got to wait and see. Could it hamper? No, because the ability to move back is about the talent that is falling to where you are on the board. It's not what other teams are trying to do. It's pick a team. The Jacksonville Jaguars are sitting there, and they're looking at their board, and they've got Greg Dulcich, just as an example I gave a few minutes, ranked at 27, which would not be shocking for some boards. And they suddenly see him there at 37, and they've got a huge need, and they can call the Bears at 39. And because they know that at 38, I'd have to look real quick, but whoever's in front of the Bears there doesn't need a tight end. That's how this stuff happens. The number of teams that would like to do this or would like to do this doesn't matter. It's what's falling to you on the board and what's coming off the board sooner than you like. You flip it around and you've got, again, pick a team, the New York Jets, maybe at 35. I don't know where they are, but let's say they're at 35.
The Jets are at that 38 spot right in front. 35
38.
35
well,
and 38.
I thought they were 35. I didn't realize they had both of them. They've also got 2 first-round picks. So, Joe Douglas already doing a nice job there, adding picks after his first year as the GM there, which is what, Ryan Poles is talking about doing. And clearly the Jets have been in a rebuild. But, you're sitting there at 35, and the Jets said, oh, man, we know Tyler Smith is our guy at 35, and Tyler Smith goes at 34. Well, suddenly they're making a few calls to teams that they think might want 35. So the trading down and trading up, you can have a desire, but it's all determined by what happens on the board in front.
And it's so difficult to project too, because I think it's easy to forget because of the nature of the business. But general managers, I mean, they're human. They have emotions, they have egos, and things happen on draft night where guys show up on board where they don't expect it. You were kind of alluding to, Hub, there. And, that does drive a little bit of how things unfold on draft night. Guys get antsy sometimes even, and they make deals they probably shouldn't.
Yeah, I don't think – it doesn't happen in the first round that way. And it doesn't happen all that much in the second round because there's still so much talent on the board. But that's where you get late second and the third round. There's always a flurry of trading in the third round. And I think that's exactly to Kyle's point. That's where things have now gotten shaken up. And, you got Ryan Poles sitting there and he's saying, oh my Lord, I never thought that, Bernard Raymond would still be there. And so suddenly he's taken that third and I don't know what else. Unfortunately, in that spot, he doesn't have a lot to work with. The 2 5s can help a little bit if he's only got to go up a few spots, and he does end up, moving up. So that's where we just got to wait and see.
Matt Rickard asks, conflicting reports yesterday on Bears entertaining trade offers for Robert Quinn. What have you heard?
Yeah, Matt, I mean, I haven't heard anything. And so when you say conflicting reports, I think a lot of the reports that we get these days are more, conjecture and, gee, that would be a good idea, as opposed to somebody actually talked to somebody and heard something. I don't think that they know. I don't think that they've made up their mind. I don't know what the tremendous advantage would be to them, particularly if they're trying to compete this year. It's one thing to make the Khalil Mack move and create all that salary cap space, Sean, but now if you also trade Robert Quinn, you've gone from one of the best pass rushing teams in the league to one of the worst, and you can't play Matt Eberflus's defense if you can't rush the passer.
Yeah, this whole thing was overblown. I think we got to talk to Robert Quinn yesterday because he was the Piccolo Award winner, and of course somebody asked him about the uncertainty and with Mac getting traded, did he think that maybe there was a chance he could? And Robert gave his answer, and then a few hours later I saw Ian Rappaport had picked up on it, and it just all got a little bit overblown. And Rappaport tweeted again this morning that the Bears are not currently shopping Robert Quinn. Quinn referenced some uncertainty in his interview, and I'm like, well, yeah, he was asked about uncertainty. Of course, he referenced uncertainty. So certainly the Bears, there's probably teams out there making calls to the Bears, but I don't necessarily think that Robert Quinn's going to be traded in the next couple of days.
That's the problem with the social media world that we live in, guys. And Ian actually, started as a beat guy at Pro Football Weekly, covering the Patriots, as I recall. And he's built a great career and he does a nice job. But Ian Rappaport may know from a source what the Bears are doing, but there's no way he can know what they're not doing, since if they're not doing it, how would he know? So I mean, this is where some of the experts have gotten a little far out over their skis, and they all want to be first. They're competing with each other. They've learned that you don't get remembered for the ones you got wrong unless they were huge. You only get remembered for the ones you get right. So guessing is okay once in a while. I don't think the Bears have decided yet what they're doing with Robert Quinn. I think a lot of it depends on how this roster develops. A lot of it depends on what somebody might give them. They got a 2 and a 6 next year for Khalil Mack that was not enough. If somebody were to show up on draft day and say Robert Quinn is the answer to our Super Bowl hopes and offer them a 3 in this draft, Robert Quinn could be gone. You got to wait. And again, you got to let it come to you. And I think that's what they're doing with Robert Quinn.
Exactly what I was going to say, Hub. I get the feeling that if someone came along and offered a similar package as you got for Khalil Mack or a 3rd round pick in this draft, the Bears would be interested. I just don't think they're actively shopping him. And frankly, I don't expect that kind of package for Robert Quinn. If they did, I think the Bears would jump at it.
I would agree. And Kyle, what everybody needs to understand is he's a year older than Khalil Mack. I mean, they're very close to the same age. But you look at the consistency with which Khalil Mack has performed. Robert Quinn has never had a season like last year, and now, and particularly after his first season here, which there were a lot of mitigating factors, I just don't think the confidence in what you're getting from another team trading for him is going to be the same as the confidence the Chargers can have in Khalil Mack. I fully expect Khalil Mack to be first-team All-Pro again this year. I don't see any reason that he won't. I don't see a lot of teams projecting that for Robert Quinn, so I just don't think you're going to get as much.
Mr. Shorty popping in with the pronunciation guide for his last name. Really appreciate that. That's one of the first things I do when I get to a Bears training camp each year is grab a pronunciation guide and try and learn the names. And I always feel bad when I'm trying to sort through the questions here. So thanks for that. Much appreciated.
Perhaps Mr. Shorty can come back and pop in and tell us, why don't you just spell it that way? But go ahead. That's right.
Jeff Dietra, I am late to this and will listen to the full podcast later. Thank you for doing that. You can subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. I just added it to Google Podcasts, and there's one other I can't remember off the top of my head. But have you guys mentioned what your draft coverage will entail? Any live coverage of day 2 and day 3? We are going to do another live stream on Friday morning at 10:30 a.m. We'll spend an hour or so with you guys like we do normally on Fridays. But obviously, a lot of things are going to change after that first round. Outside of that, Hub, we got a pick-by-pick mock for the Chicago Bears that you're going to be filing this afternoon. And then go ahead.
Yeah. Guys, day 3 is tough because we're back at it at like 9 to get ready for them to start. I can't remember if it's at 10 or 11, so it would be tough to podcast. But as Kyle just said, we'll be live from 10:30 And I mean, I think they get long after an hour, but if there's a lot of questions, we'll be here to take them. That's going to be the big day. I mean, it would be stunning if the Bears ended up in the first round Thursday night, but all kinds of things could happen Friday night. So we'll preview that. And then you want to be at shawlocal.com, pretty much all weekend is, I don't know, we haven't really fully flushed this out, Sean and Kyle, but I suspect we'll probably do a little more shorter, things to get them up there with analysis of various picks as they're made. And then, of course, all three of us will be tweeting throughout the draft. In the first round, I'm usually tweeting and offering thoughts after almost every pick. So you want to be sure and stay at Kyle Nabors, at Sean_Hammond, and at Hub _Arkush. So we're going to have it wall to wall for you. And we hope that you'll all be with us.
Yeah, it's going to have a ton of coverage. It's a little odd, as we talk about the uncertainty of what the Bears are going to do. Like last year, Sean, you can attest, Sean pre-wrote a bunch of stories, so we could get them up on the web as quickly as possible, whether the Bears traded up for a quarterback, but we don't really know what direction Ryan Poles is going in. So pre-writing anything this year is a little difficult, but it's going to make it fun particularly on Friday and Saturday here to see how things develop. Let's see here. We still got the chat's moving really quickly today, which is great to see everyone. Brett Morgan had a question. I have seen a few drafts where the Bears take wide receiver Tyquan Thornton from Baylor with the 148th pick. Would this be a good pick at that spot, Huh?
Yeah, he's a kid that I like. He is very interesting. At 148, might be a little rich just based on the other analyses and scouting reports I'm reading. I'd love to see him come in here and compete. Whether he is a 5th round pick or this again with these wide receivers, Sean, I would not be upset at that point. A lot of that really depends on what they do before they get to 148. Again, if they've already taken a wide receiver in the first 3 picks, assuming they've only had 3 picks. We don't know again. They could very well end up adding, 4th round picks as they start to deal back. But if they've only taken 1 wide receiver when they get to 148, then I wouldn't mind him there. If they've taken more than 1, or if they don't have at least 2 offensive linemen, then I'd still rather see the focus there. But you want the best player available. And I've seen this kid anywhere from, the 140s up to the 180s or even 200. So this is where you kind of get into this pile of everybody's got the same grade, and it gets more into individual taste.
Yeah. It's really about that individual taste and what you're looking for. And he is a little bit bigger. He's 6'2". He's one of those guys with a little bit of size, like we were talking about earlier. And I mean, it comes down to what you have already. And I would expect the Bears are probably going to take 2 receivers. We don't know that for a fact. Certainly if they do add more picks in a trade, then that becomes more and more likely. But yeah, have they gotten 1 already? Have they gotten 2? Where are they at as far as drafting receivers when you get to that spot? It's really hard once you get down past those first couple of rounds, like you're saying, Hub, it's hard to differentiate from some of these guys in the later rounds. And I think it really just comes down to what they like and what body type they like and what level of production they like.
As we move here close to an hour, everyone, if you have questions on specific prospects as we wrap up today, throw them back in. There's quite a few questions coming in. I'm starting to lose track here. I'm going to go to Robbie here, who's popped up with a question. Chad Mumma or Troy Anderson, if you had to choose, Hub?
All right, let me back up for just a minute. The reason I think there's interest in Thornton there is because you're looking at the triangle numbers, and he is the kid that ran 4.28 at the 4.28 40, and he's almost 6'3" and 183 pounds. So he's that combination of size and speed that you're looking for. As far as Mumma and Anderson, I'm kind of a Troy Anderson guy. He's really an interesting prospect. I think they're both going to be good NFL players. They remind me a lot of a Blake Martinez type, who are going to come in and be tackling machines, but are not, the exceptional big player athletes that you expect at the next level, but they're going to have good NFL careers. There's something about Troy Anderson that's kind of caught my eye. Mumma maybe the more accomplished, college player. Although again, neither one from huge football factories. But Sean, forced to choose between them, I'd probably take Troy Anderson.
I'm taking Troy Anderson just for this crazy fact here that during his college career at Montana State, he at one point led the team in separate seasons in passing, rushing, and tackles.
Yeah, I mean, he's played almost every position on the field. You gotta love the kid. And he played like a big time linebacker once they finally put him there and left him there. Muma, on the other hand, as I say, he's the more finished product. He's been a linebacker. That's what he was groomed to be. I think they're both going to be good NFL linebackers. Anderson is such an athlete that again, if you're drafting both traits and production, he probably, to me, might have a little higher ceiling.
So yeah, it's probably a little bit of a project.
What are both of those guys you would project at middle linebacker, or at looking at where the Bears are at with Roquan? Are they Sam linebackers? What do where would they fit into a 4-3 Matt Eberflus defense?
I think they're both inside guys. I think that Muma might be more of a traditional, straight up Mike linebacker. Anderson, again, he can play anywhere. He could play the Sam linebacker. He's not going to be your Will linebacker, although he is an athlete. He's a good enough athlete for it. So Anderson certainly gives you the most flexibility. He could play almost anywhere in almost any scheme. I think Muma is more plugged as an inside guy, whether it's a 3-4 or at the Mike in a 4-3.
Thomas asked a question here, and I'm not really sure we can answer it, but we'll give it a go for you. And considering where the Bears might lean this year, are there any stud defensive tackle 3 techniques in next year's draft? If so, is it possible that they don't draft one with earlier pick with eyes on next year's draft? I will say, Thomas, at least I have not given any thought to next year's draft, but maybe Hub has. So.
No, I'm going to guess it's Tomaz. Actually, just reading the spelling and Tomaz. I mean, I'm still trying to get my arms around this year. So it's not an unfair question. I mean, we get these kids who are great players who are eligible to come out and don't. There was talk about Aiden Hutchinson coming out after 2020. He chose to go back for what he called his senior year. He actually had one more year of eligibility because they gifted it, and you saw what happened. And so is there that kind of prospect? None that I'm aware of, but again, we're so focused on the kids that are in this draft that's Kyle, not something I've studied a whole lot.
Derek with a comment, not really. I would not be upset if the Bears stay in the trenches with the first 3 picks. The game starts on both sides of the offensive line. Wouldn't be surprised to see the Bears stick with that kind of a strategy. And then E. King here. If Christian Watson or Alec Pierce are sitting there at that 39 pick, I don't see the Bears passing on either, unless there is a player that drops unexpectedly out of the first round that they can pick up. Hub, any thoughts there?
Well, let me go back. What was the question before? Ring a bell with me before I get to Watson and Pierce. Just that there was a comment. Oh, the trend in the trend. Guys, yeah. I'm going to be surprised if they don't move around, if they make those 3 picks at 39, 48, and 71, I'm going to be surprised if 2 of them are not offensive linemen. I got to take the man at his word. We've talked to Ryan Poles at length 4 times now, and I keep coming back to the same thing. And what I saw at that minicamp, but when he says stay in the trenches, and there was a question earlier about defensive tackle, that's another position where, the fact that Akeem Hicks and Bilal Nichols are gone is very upsetting, but they've still got competition there. I think that they're excited about Kairos Tonga. Angelo Blackson is a career journeyman, solid guy who you can plug in. Mario Edwards Jr. is going to be a threat at the 3 technique as a pass rusher, interior pass rusher. That's what he's really good at. And then Justin Jones is somebody they're high on, So none of those guys rise to the level of an Akeem Hicks, and I'm not even sure any of them have the ceiling of a Bilal Nichols. But, they're NFL tackles. And so that's why I'm just not as focused there as some of these other positions. So when you say trenches, I agree. But I think in this case, at least on day 2, it's going to be offensive line. And then getting back to Alec Pierce and Christian Watson. Watson is just more exciting. Okay. Pierce, however, is exciting and is a very accomplished prospect. I think with Watson, almost some of it is the unknown with North Dakota State. And yes, that is where Carson Wentz went. We've seen how that's been a roller coaster since he got in the league, not just when he was drafted. There's something about watching Watson a little bit on tape, there's not that much tape available, but talking to some of my best sources, that I think teams have him with a higher ceiling than Pierce. But at 39, I think either one of those, Sean, would be, reasonable value.
Yeah, either one of those is reasonable. I like Watson's size and speed combination, but you're right. That's more of a wild card. I think Alec Pierce is probably the safer pick in that spot.
Yeah, and Pierce isn't slow. He just doesn't have that open your eyes stopwatch speed. But everybody does talk about, and you can see it on the tape, he's an outstanding athlete. He's going to win most contested balls. He's going to high point balls that other guys can't get at. So there certainly is a case to be made for Pierce too.
Alec Pierce, I think he stands out to me, as you kind of alluded there, Hub. Like, I feel very confident Alec Pierce is going to get to the spot on the field he's supposed to be at a very consistent, rate. You know what I mean?
Yeah, let me give you a guy that I still to this day don't understand, and I'm a Michigan alum, so I watch these kids more closely. But when Donovan Peoples-Jones got out of the back of the first round, I figured, okay, he didn't have the best year when he went back to Michigan, but there's no way he gets out of the second round. Well, when he's sitting there for the Browns in the third round, I'm thinking, oh my Lord, what are people doing? And now he's basically becoming he's an excellent number 3 and may even be a number 2 receiver. That's where I see Alex Pierce. Their body types are the same. Their scouting reports are the same, and I think that's a pretty good NFL comp right now for who I think Pierce can and will be.
Yeah, Michael Ibsen here. Pierce is money on third down in the red zone. We need that guy. All right, we're gonna wrap it up here as we're over an hour. I'm gonna give Robbie, one of our longtime viewers here, back when there was barely anyone watching this live. Has been with us for a while. I'm gonna let him finish it off here, Hub, and he says Travis Jones, defensive tackle, Abraham Lucas, offensive tackle, Saylor, guard tackle in the first 3 picks. He'd be a happy man with that. Robbie would be.
Yeah, Robbie, I don't know where you're taking Travis Jones, though. I don't have him. Lucas, I could see, when you get down around 71. Saylor is a guy that some people like at 39 or 48. He is that combo guard tackle, who might end up helping you at either position. But the defensive tackle, I don't think they're going there, and that's not a player that I'd be that disappointed if I missed on. I mean, God knows in this business you're wrong more than you're right, but we'll see. But Sean, we spent a lot of time with these, so I'm okay with 2 of his picks, but Travis Jones, I'm not so sure about.
Well, we know Ravi is a big fan of the trenches. I don't know if Jones is even going to be there at that spot. The Bears would probably need him to fall a little bit. But yeah, I got no problem with those other picks.
All right, Hub, let's get out of here. I'll let you do the propers.
Yeah, I wasn't here to do my job at the start, so I'll do it at the end. One of these days I'll figure out how the computer and the earbuds work. You would think after all these years I'd know. But thank you all so much for being with us this week. We want to remind you again, a special edition of our ShawLocal.com Bears Insider podcast, Friday morning at 10:30 Chicago time. The plan is to go our usual 45 minutes to an hour, but if you all show up and there's a lot to talk about, we'll answer as many questions as we can. If you are not watching these podcasts and participating with us via StreamYard, of course, you can download them as a normal podcast. Just be sure and go to the App Store on your phone or to iTunes or to YouTube, or I should say ShawLocal.com to get a subscription to our podcast so it comes to you automatically. We do enjoy when you can join us live because we get to talk to you and get an idea of what's on your mind. So thank you all so much for being with us, guys. We're going to be going pretty much 24/7 the next 5 days. So if you're not with us in our live StreamYard links here, if you are not you should be at ShawLocal.com, or at least have that window open once the draft starts, because we're going to be constantly putting up updates and content. And then follow our Twitter accounts at Kyle Nabors, at Sean_Hammond, at Hub _Arkush. We're going to have this draft blanketed wall to wall for you, and it will all start. It started already. Get to ShawLocal.com. I hate mock drafts, but we're going to start doing some mocking today and tomorrow. So that's going to be up next at ShawLocal.com. For now, thanks for being with us today, and we hope to see you again on Friday.